if we have to be that, what we're projecting to be the third largest economy in the world, $7-8 trillion economy, we there will be a need of 10 crore jobs that will get created. You can write a GMAT and go to you can go out of India the next day, or you can get a job in a different city fairly quickly. So you don't want to tie yourself by a bunch of car loans, house loans, etc., etc. My father always had a very comical take on that. Whenever there used to be a downturn, at least in my life in college, he used to have very funny take. बेटा अब इससे नीचे नहीं जाओगे.
In today's episode, we are joined by Geetansh Bamania, founder and CEO of Rentomojo, India's largest appliance and furniture rental company. With revenues of close to 300 crores and also profitable, Rentomojo operates across 20 cities in India, offering flexible subscription-based solutions to close to 5 lakh customers. A graduate from IIT Madras, Geetansh's journey spans key roles at Flipkart and Pepperfry, another furniture company, before launching Rentomojo in 2015. Join us as we explore how he's transforming urban living through the rental economy, how building has been over the last almost a decade, and scaling a business that combines affordability, sustainability, and innovation. Geetansh, welcome to the podcast.
No, thank you, Aviral. Thanks, Mazin, for having me. Thank you. Very excited for the conversation.
So we'll start with the rapid fire. Our rapid fire goes on all season long, unlike Karan Johar's, which is limited. So what's one piece of furniture or gadget you can't live without?
Possibly my wife would say my couch, which is there in the living room. I think after our take walks, that's where we watch a bunch of content. Possibly some of the podcasts like these. So yeah, that's one fairly closer to my heart for sure.
You build a company on rentals. What's one thing that you would never rent and always own?
I've stayed true to the philosophy of renting. So we will purchase car fairly very late. I don't think there is a piece of product which is depreciating in nature which I'll invest into. I mean, that's the philosophy that possibly we go by within the company as well. I don't think I did. In fact, when I recently graduated, I was just 30,000-40,000 rupees a month. When I purchased just to tell my parents, and now ladka stable ho gaya hai, I purchased something 1 lakh and I regret it till date. I should have saved that 2 lakh and possibly invested into my last company. So I think that's I don't see a sense in investing into depreciating assets. The same $100 if you invest into something which is material can potentially give you either 14-15%, or if done right can give you 3 to 4x as well. So very recently I purchased a car, and that too because some of the marketplaces were not doing a great job. So hence, yeah, I don't think I would love to.
So there's a problem statement for entrepreneurs here.
Yes.
Car rentals.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Leasing is a mainstream concept altogether, but what we try and achieve is that you should be able to return the car whenever you want. Also, you should be able to break your lease. So I think that's one of the differentiations, how we differentiate from the leasing industry altogether.
Right. That's a good point. Maybe another product line for you, perhaps. What's a book or podcast that you recommend to every entrepreneur?
Not two of the folks have really inspired me a lot. And Aviral, you might agree with a few of them. I think I don't know if you're a fan of Ray Dalio. I've been a huge fan.
The book is here somewhere on the top.
I'm sure
Principles
would be the way they last 2 years I've realized two things about me. I love caving, and I've started going to places which are of historical importance. Harappa Valley, and the bunch of I want to go to Egypt also. This guy Ray Dalio actually talks and derives a lot of insights from historical behavior right across. So his books, of course, and the Yuval is also another one which also drives a lot of insights. One is on the corporate side, and generally how the economies shape up. I mean, that's Ray Dalio. But Yuval also has a very nice insights on just our evolution as such, and what future would look like. But both of them has similarities or drawing a lot of inferences from historical trends and behavior, which is very, something I find very, very insightful.
I agree. I think history is a very good teacher. A
Yeah.
history is a documentation of human behavior which doesn't change very quickly. So to predict how people will act, it's a good way to think.
Especially
In my,
if somebody talks about 500, 600 years back, right? I mean,
correct.
typically I've seen people talking about a few decades and they try and project it forward.
Yeah,
Some of the ways Ray Dalio has done going back 500, 600 years is good. You don't have documented, content as well, but to
correct.
really cut through the clutter and really making sense out of it is commendable.
What's your favorite hiring question?
Uh, See, most of the time when a when let's say the prospect is coming to me, most of the technical questions are already out. The team does a great job, and we have a very grilling process. Everyone within the core team actually will have a point of view. And my interview is mostly right before the case study. So, all I'm looking at possibly some of the behavioral aspects, although I did do speak about the technical aspects as well, but some of the aspects that I get influenced a lot more is on how is he talking about his last company or last boss or, his colleagues. One thing that I specifically try and pinpoint is the victimizing attitude. You know, was ये नहीं कर पाया because ये problem हो रही थी, ये chance नहीं मिला. वो वाला aspect is something that I try and filter out. So I think that's most of the questions will be in and around some of the cultural aspects.
Interesting. Interesting. And maybe related to that or not, what's one truth few people agree with you on?
I think specifically in this moment, and specifically with my CTO and somewhere along the community, there's a big. I think either people on at the one extreme where everyone is feeling AI is super overvalued, or at the other spectrum of things, people are sensing that AI is super undervalued.
Hmm.
I'm at the undervalued end. There is a certain sense of exponentiality that comes with learning. I mean, 2 into 2 into 8 into 2, 16 to it just at some point of time, the learning is so exponential that it'll just in front of our own eyes, it will be very difficult to detect that inflection point, and which is what in fact, I'll just share anecdotal evidence. I was fairly against, because the chat bot was not performing that well. And my team actually made me speak to somebody for 5 minutes. And I was slightly perplexed and surprised. Why is it taking slight pauses? The guy speaking well, Indian
Hmm.
accent and all of that. 5 minutes down the line, I realized it was actually,
A bot.
yeah, which was speaking to me. And I was mesmerized. And since then we have, of course, inculcated that into, our chat, and there's unsupervised learning on modules that we're using across our, operations and bunch of other aspects. I At least I've started seeing its impact. So yeah, I'm quite bullish about it. Very, very bullish about it.
I think that's a good segue into a technical education. So you studied at IIT Madras. Uh, Talk us through maybe life before it. How did you end up there? Were there any influences in IIT on you to think about entrepreneurship or solving problems?
I come from a small town in India, Raipur, Chhattisgarh. I don't know how many of you would know about it. Raipur, तो काफी लोग सुने होंगे, but
Hmm.
Chennai is where I'm actually from. We're a kind of a small town like Vizag, Visakhapatnam. That back in the days, when I was at least trying to study, there were only two professions that were given to us. Either you can become a doctor or engineer. So I
Hmm.
think both the professions were there in my family itself. My mother was a doctor. I is a doctor, practicing doctor. My father, was an engineer, and my brother took the route of IIT Bombay. So that pretty much set the road for me for sure. So that's how I think I got exposure. IIT Madras was fun. I think first 1 year I was just adapting. it was a very different experience for me coming. I was not understanding the food, I was not understanding the language. With 5 years hence, now if I have to choose a city, in terms, I've become a half South Indian. My mother's, born and brought up in Maharashtra, but so I call myself half Maharashtrian and half South Indian when it comes to food. So good influence on me. I mean, I love the city now. I can go back any other day. IT in general, I think most of the colleges puts you, if the journey is lucky, they put you in a lot of extremes. Uh, been the case with me also. Because that 1 year I was not adapting well. I must have chosen very, very rigid paths. Uh, I realized that if I put my mind to something, that's the confidence that I got because of, I think, IIT Madras, that if I put a mind to something, I have a sense of I want a closure on it at some point. And so that's one thing that. But there were a lot of spillover effects also because of that. Because if you're only looking at music, only looking at some let's say contraption as a event altogether, or only looking at certain field, then you'll possibly just go in that direction and you'll sacrifice in some of the other ones. That also created a bunch of extremities for me. And I think my father always had a very comical take on that. Whenever there used to be a downturn, at least in my life in college, he used to have very funny take. "Beta, ab isse niche nahi jaoge."
Okay.
So that I think club, gave me a great amount of confidence that I can start off. Of course, in college itself, I was, participating in contraptions. I was, a bunch of seniors were outside already graduated. I was helping them in their startups, whatever my learnings were. So I knew one thing for sure that, at least at that point in time, I used to think I'm the only guy who can think very innovatively. Yeah, maybe the ideas are it, but now I know that's not the reality. There are millions and millions. There are minds out there who can think well. They can, some people can do great processes. Some people can think well. So at least I was thinking innovatively, and that kind of resulted in me starting off in a financial services. I was the only guy. I was into mechanical. I was also into intelligent manufacturing. So I was playing with robotics as well. I did some of the extremities, ensured that I did some of the best in my last year project. But eventually, I was also the one, across the entire college who was also trying to clear CFA. And CFA was not that, this US CFA that I'm talking about. Some people might say I've sacrificed a seat for engineering by pursuing finance as well. But I was fairly interested in macroeconomics. So I did CFA, got into financial services post right after college, which was a great exposure for me. And then moved from from KPMG to got an exposure with Flipkart. Then I dabbled in Flipkart for some time. Then slowly as we started Rentomojo after a while.
Understand. And you also started a company called Click to Skill.
Yeah.
How did that experience, along with probably working at Flipkart and Pepperfry in the very early days of the internet ecosystem? When you worked at Flipkart and Pepperfry, Flipkart at least was not that large.
Excellent. Invested into Flipkart then. I never
Oh,
realized, I never knew they got to fund my own startup, let's say 2 to 3 years down the line, which
nice.
was a good karma. Yeah.
How was that experience? What did you learn, both from the Flipkart and Pepperfry experience as well as your first startup?
So let me talk about Flipkart and Pepperfry first. I think I would say possibly smaller stakes, was close to a year at both. Flipkart was super interesting because it gave me the magnanimity of things, right? I mean, it was still very large, back in it was compared to, where it is today. It's of course, fairly small, but, gave me a good degree of culture and product mindset. I was in product. So give me a good clarity around there. In fact, helped me also start off Click to Skill because, prior to that, I was in KPMG and I was consulting a bunch of people. For most of the projects that were coming to my door, I used to consult a bunch of other people to consult them, which was a very ironical behavior. So I thought, why not create a marketplace where people can jump in and speak to each other and consult each other over a 10-20 minute call, which is like a proxy of GLG that we see now. So I think Flipkart gave me a great degree of product mindset and also exposed me to the e-commerce setup in general. How product works in an e-commerce setup. That was very good. With Pepperfry, that gave me a good understanding of how the furniture and appliances industry is in terms of the margin structures. So thoda धंधे की बात I think I got in terms of Pepperfry, whereas Flipkart was more tech and product and data oriented. Both of that actually helped me with current Rentomojo as well. And of course, with Click to Scale, I think nothing could have prepared me for a 10-year journey at Rentomojo. What I started off with, what I'm doing now, uh, I don't think anything could have prepared. But of course, when I started Rentomojo, I knew something what I need to do in terms of I have to reach a product market fit, which I couldn't reach in Click to Scale. I think I was more of a product guy, thinking that if I keep making changes and it's going to work in itself, and consumers will start. I was not focusing a lot more on getting the revenue, getting the initial traction, or getting the narrative right to get the next set of capital to accelerate the narrative. All those aspects were not there. But having failed at that, I knew that I typically at Click to Scale, if I have to define myself, I was just a wannabe founder. I wanted to be a wannabe entrepreneur. From a wannabe founder, I actually became a founder at Rentomojo when this time I didn't raise capital. I put in my own capital, so there was a little bit of a skin in the game. I took capital from my family as well, which they were gracious enough to possibly kudos to my mom to actually help me out. A bunch of friends and family at that point of time. But I now realize after 10 years, my limited learning has been that there are various phases that a company goes through. The first phase when somebody is thinking of is, I would say, is of a wannabe founder. When the product market fit is there is when either you take external capital once you have initial traction and product market fit, or you can run as a bootstrap as well. But you move from a wannabe founder to a founder and then start attracting more and more talent, right? But in the initial days, the traction and the talent is coming in a way that you're still honing a lot of direction for the initial set of fundamentals of your business. Like for Rentomojo, the fundamentals are we have a e-commerce component, we have a large logistics, warehousing, etc., which is the fundamental of the business, which exactly all the complexities that a Flipkart would have, right? We also have a subscription angle, in which we need to go out and get collections from consumers on a monthly basis, which is another complexity. So subscription became fundamental altogether. We have a quasi lending aspect as well, because we are raising on balance sheet and then financing all these assets and essentially leasing out and renting out the consumers, right? So there is a balance sheet component also that needs to manage. So all these became the fundamentals. So in the initial days, when I was when I was trying to start Rentomojo or reach the product market fit, I was hiring for these kind of fundamentals. So you're shaping a lot of direction then. But there comes a phase where your revenue traction starts happening is when you start becoming a CEO from a founder. I think that's the journey that happened a few years back for us, and we started focusing a lot more. CEO's job is very different from a founder. You don't have to go very micro in all cases. So I think that's the transition that happened with me a few years back. More strategic alignment, reading of the people, why they will stick around with you, really imparting that vision for a really long term and keeping some really high caliber, talented people with you for a really long term is a very, very difficult job. So doing that and really focusing on building the right processes, ensuring that it works like a machine, right? The concept of a AOP has come possibly 1.5 years back for us. Slightly late, I would say, but but it is doing wonders. The concept of a COS, so it's still becoming a machine. Hopefully, in the next 1 year, I'll transition my role to being a more promoter, because we're also thinking of listing in the next 1.5 years. Possibly we're just preparing for it. Let's see, how it goes. But that's going to be something which will transition my role. And of course, all the characteristics of a CEO will be there, but I'll be focusing a lot more on governance as well, because there's going to be retail money, which people will be trusting me with. So a lot of those aspects will start coming as well. And hopefully, being a promoter, I want to build an institution. I have not seen that phase now, but I think people say that at that scale, you're thinking about creating an institution. So hopefully that happens. So these are possibly the 4 or 5 phases that I don't think anybody can prepare you for. But yeah, it's a learning on the job.
No, that's amazing. And we'll talk more about all those phases, but I want to go to the beginning of Rentomojo. Back in 2015, what were some of the key challenges when you were setting up the business? What was the core problem that you were solving? How did you go about doing it?
So, um, so as I was saying, right? I mean, from a small town, Bhilai, you know, I had my parents are a byproduct of a generation where their parents were below the poverty line. My father possibly was the only one who was able to come out of a village, had seven brothers. He was the only one who could make it out. So from those, I think that generation was looking at stability as a whole, and I
Yeah.
think all of our parents were looking at stability.
Yes.
And that's the reason why they stayed at one company for 30, 40 years. My father retired as a GM at Bhilai Steel Plant and stayed at that company for 40 years. My mother's been a doctor, stayed in one company for 40 years. Thanks to them, at least me, my brother, and the generation now and the generation after me, because of our parents, can now take necessary risk. We can graduate out of our tier two and tier three and really start focusing on a lot of progress and maybe wealth creation at some point in time, right? And that can only happen if you have a risk taking mindset now. You can't look at a lot more, it's just stability. In the first 10 to 15 years of your life, you're looking at what can really gravitate me more towards better progress in life, right? And when you have that kind of a mind state, you're essentially looking at uncertain environments. You can write a GMAT and go to you can go out of India the next day, or you can get a job in a different city fairly quickly. So you don't want to tie yourself by a bunch of car loans, house loans, etc., etc. And so India is at a very important or interesting time frame where a lot of consumers, a lot of these folks like me from smaller towns are coming in. They start off with a 30 to 40,000 rupees monthly salary, whereas the cost of furnishing itself is about 2 lakh. So that's 4 to 5 lakh, 6 times of their monthly salary. And hence we all are bullish
Yeah.
in credit, right? But credit is very rigid in nature. It doesn't let you operate in that mind state of progress, because every time you will think of the question
So
क्या है,
you're tied
ईएमआई
down.
पटाने हैं,
Yeah.
ये स्टेप रुक या
Yeah.
स्टार्टअप चालू करूंगे, मेरे को ईएमआई पटाना है, मेरे को ये इसका ईएमआई पटाना है. So that if India needs to grow, if urbanization needs to happen, if many metros needs to happen, you need a solution which has all the benefits of a credit solution like a EMI that doesn't let you spend that degree of capex, but also at the same time has all the benefits of a subscription, play it, play out. मेरे को जब तक नेटफ्लिक्स देखना है देखूंगा, उसके बाद इट नीड्स टू गो आउट. So that if you marry both of them, that's the white space that we are solving for. For this young urban India, you need a subscription solution from asset. At Furniture and Appliances, we're trying to do this job. So I think this was the broad statement that I wanted to overall from a macro perspective is something that I wanted to solve up. But I just recall that you also asked how did I start off? Is that one of the
Yes.
yeah.
So, yes. So you identify this problem space. How did you go about, getting your first few customers, getting that initial traction?
Identification was very funny. I mean, of course, I have my fair share of coming out of IIT. I joined Bangalore. I just told you that I spent 2 lakhs furnishing my apartment, and I realized I should have rather put it in my own startup, which was Click to Scale, because I was begging
Yes.
again from my parents again. I should have rather done that. But I was moving, from one place to the other, having all that burden of furniture and appliances from one place to the other. And when I moved to Delhi, the landlord was telling me that I can't reduce the rentals just because you have gotten your products with you. So you need to figure out a way to dispose it. So I sold them at peanuts. That's when I realized that this carrying of products from one place to the other doesn't make sense, and I would have I'd spent more in relocation from one place to the other than the cost of a few products itself. Right? I spent around 30,000-40,000 just relocating from one place to the other. It just didn't make sense. Incidentally, I was, with Pepperfry, I was also selling furniture. So I knew the kind of consumer which is there. Somebody who's a homeowner, wants to do up their house, etc., etc. Somebody who's slightly more stable with a kid, they're now transitioning into a more stable journey altogether. Folks like me were not there. 25, 27, 24 average age, etc., etc. Incidentally, there was a small, road in Bombay called Kharni Road. So there was a small manufacturer who had given, who used to do renting at a local, at a very localized setup. So we were continuing with them. So I had 3 or 4 products with me when I was paying about 1,000 rupees a month for it. After 18, 20 months, after paying him close to about 20,000, I called them up. We were, having a good, session on chai. That's when I asked him, what's the cost? You've made, the cost of the product itself is, closer to about this, you have already taken so much out of me. So he said, he made me realize one thing very, he said, sir, आपने तो 20,000 दिए ही हैं आपसे पहले जो यहाँ रहते थे उसने भी 20,000 दिए और उससे पहले जो यहाँ रहता था उसने भी 20,000 दिए. So just to put things into perspective, I know I'm using a lot of Hindi also I could be, but essentially the tenants kept moving from one place to the other, but the products were there within the house. It was just
Unlike your journey where you have to move your stuff. Yeah, that's
he
fascinating.
kept it deployed, but as the
Yes.
tenants kept moving, he essentially didn't make margin from just me. He ensured that he's able to make margin out of the useful life of the asset by keeping it deployed at multiple times. And I realized that's very fascinating. Instead of making some margin initially by selling the product, why don't I turn the table in terms of the commerce and see that can I make it over a useful life of the asset? Can I make revenue over the useful life of the asset? And that's what apparently most of these companies do. Anybody who's in the occupancy based business, you look at co-working spaces, they after a long lease, they pretty much get a bunch of seats. They manage about 1,000 seats, and all they do is every day they manage occupancy of it, ensuring that every seat is generating revenue on a daily basis. Indigo also, airline as well, very similar business, right? They have a bunch of seats. They ensure that you are writing on those seats and generating revenue on a daily basis. And the way they procure those seats is through some bit of a capital structure like raising debt or having long-term leases. Indigo does a lot of these sale and lease back. Bunch of these co-working setups either take a debt or a long-term lease to get and manage those seats for them. So very similarly, I realized that this can be a credible opportunity for a consumer. Also, it's making sense. Instead of spending 1.5 lakh, you're only spending 3,000-4,000 rupees a month. So for 3 years, 3.5 years, 4 years, also you're not coming closer to the market value of the product, which makes sense. And it's not a liability on your head. You're paying monthly. You can get in, get out whenever you want. There's free relocation. There's free maintenance. So I felt this as a proposition can be scaled, exponentially as India grows.
No, that makes sense. So you kind of found this problem, and you knew that it was a problem. How did you go about actually getting your first building MVP, getting your first few customers? Was that?
So initial was, of course, I had to pull in capital from friends and family. It was not a very ideal thing for my roommates because, it was a house where, three of us were already staying, and I converted that into an office and a warehouse and a photo shoot area. Every day
Nice.
some of the other guys coming, taking photos, there's laborers coming and taking the assets out and assets in. Was not an ideal situation for them, but I think that became our office. Took that capital, created a quick platform. Those days, Magento, there is some framework that used to happen, CMS platform used to happen, created a platform on that. Then, I remember the first order when it came, I was so excited. It turned out to be a fraud case because somebody, of course, the moment you see cases like, I'm getting a TV and a washing machine and a bunch of furniture worth several lakhs. And if somebody is getting it a few thousand, I'm sure, you'll attract such folks as well. But, very quickly I realized within the first month itself, I was having close to about 50 subscribers. I used to go and deliver myself. On my birthday, I was delivering. When my parents were enjoying, sadly enough, I was delivering, although I was able to reach out. Uh, but it was a fascinating time for the first one month. But that's when I realized that I need more partners, who can look at these fundamentals of the business. That somebody can take care of operations, somebody can take care of marketing. So slowly and gradually that happened. But the best part about this business was in a business like this, from first day you're generating revenue. and it's a subscription revenue. So although let's say this year we'll be doing close to about 300 crores, but that's predictable for the next 14 months. Even if I don't grow, I'll be making 300 into 14 times. And that's the reason, because of the predictability, subscription entities are, uh, let me just say, valued differently. Let me just put it this way. So I realized that there is a certain narrative, macro is working out, we have initial traction. At that point in time, co-living as a space was also coming up. There were some investments which were already happening. So I think people saw this as a natural extension of co-living, because for a co-living you need, but although now we realize that how co-living, and this is so totally different. People tend to come to us post churning out from a co-living. So when somebody has already stayed for a 6 to 7 months, the moment somebody is there, they might want to try out a PG or some bit of a setup. But the moment they think of their own house and their own flexibility and convenience, they don't want they have a lot of privacy issues, and the moment they churn out of that, that's where we come in, and the consumer stays with us for a longer, much longer period. But for the next 10, 15 years, somebody stays with us. So the dynamics are slightly different, but that's one of the first tractions that we got. I think Axel and Chirate invested into the entity. Cut to a few years down the line, the biggest problem statement that we had to solve was nobody had thought of everyone. If I come to you as a HNI and ask you for, let's say, some bit of a debt to fund a lending product, you would still know, okay, loans I understand, but furniture and appliances nobody understood. Like, how can I fund a business in which I'm getting a collateral of furniture and appliances at the end of the day? So educating the market that this can be an asset class that you can raise capital on was the most toughest. And I went to some of my uncles and mamas and chachas. Of course, pehla paisa bhi family se aaya tha. For this problem statement also, I went in my network and said that, give me 10 lakhs, I'll be able to give you a return. Something like that. But slowly, I think those were some of the seed steps that we took, which transitioned out from a very small retail investor to a HNI. We made that into a proper, we were the first ones back in 2017 to make this into a proper financial product. And we were working with some of the largest wealth companies to distribute that product. And we raised, several $1 million to finance some of these assets. And now in a much more stable state, as I said, that, we've been profitable for 3 years. So balance sheet and net worth doesn't deplete. We have proven the business model, because we have proven that we can rotate these furniture over and over again. So because of all those aspects, now that whole problem statement of initially educating the market and raising capital for these asset classes now has become very, very doable because of these two aspects.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And talking a bit about the market, Rentomojo is present in 20 cities. What are some of the difference in expectations from customers in tier 1 and tier 2 cities, and how do you go about addressing it with your offerings?
What we provide are basic building blocks of house, right? Anybody who's coming in needs a place to sleep, so which is bed, mattress, place to keep their clothes, wardrobe, and basic things like they need a fridge to keep their food at the end of the day. Maybe the second layer would be even washing machine. I would consider an essential. Maybe the next layer would be a dining table or a TV, and subsequently maybe a more extension would be a microwave or something like that. But since it's very basic essentials of a building block of a house, we don't see much of a difference in terms of the buying behavior between cities. But since in some cities where we have been staying for the last 10 years, there's larger more trust. Because of which maybe in, let's say, new cities, people would be possibly taking tenures 3 to 4 months to begin with. They of course extend, which in major cities would initially itself be about 16 to 18. So that's one of the differences that we're seeing. But of course, the new cities are growing at superbly high rates versus, of course, the base is small. But some of the older cities, Bangalore is still the highest growing crossing city for us.
Interesting. Okay. So subtle differences, but not huge. And when talking about your customer base, you have now over 5 lakh customers. When you're doing it in the early days, you could actually go and do the deliveries yourself. But now that you've scaled, how do you still ensure quality and customer satisfaction for so many customers?
Our acquisition, the largest percentage of the acquisition is actually coming on organic, which is a testament of the experience that we provide. And it's a very difficult business to provide experience on. Let me just give you a, like on a selling brand, you have essentially two touch points, right? You place an order, you create a platform, you get the consumer, you place a order, you go and deliver. In our case, there is a KYC. I'm there to it. We take a deposit. Then we have to go and it's a bulky product, so the consumer has to be at the at the time when we are delivering, which is not the case that some bit of a courier will come.
An envelope, basically. Yeah.
That.
Yeah.
We have to coordinate for all of that. In many cases, if you order from any of the large e-commerce setups, it'll take 7 to 10 days for installation, wherever installation is involved. After a delivery of 10 to 12 days, right? We do all of these deliveries in 1 to 2 days with installation, which becomes a nightmare to coordinate. Then, once delivered, that's when the subscription, the real journey begins, which for many, the touchpoint is over because it's a two touchpoint model. There, every month I have to go and collect the repayments back. If somebody is not paying, then ensure that payments are happening on time. Throughout the journey of 17, 18, 20 months, people can go to a new place altogether. So we provide free location. That's another touch point. We are at beck and call for our users for repair and maintenance, which imagine what will be the structure, with, let's say, if you take a TV from some brand, you can count the number of days, one can take. We have to do repair also within a day. So all of these aspects. And then once somebody closes the contract, it comes back. That's the last touch point, and then refund is the last touch point. So imagine it's a business model with so many different touch points that you have the complexities of subscription, you have the complexities of e-commerce, you have the complexities of balance sheet business and a refurbishing infrastructure altogether, right? So experience is one of the most important facets, and it is only possible because at the soul of it looks like an operation entity, but at the soul of it, it's a pure tech company. The way we do risk assessment, it has taken us 8 years to perfect our algorithm. And we're now moving more towards the unsupervised learning algorithm on our risk assessment. Because many people think that we kind of evaluate the credit worthiness of the user, but we actually evaluate whether the consumer can vanish tomorrow. Because worst case scenario, I just want my asset back, right? That's just one example I'm giving, which we have automated completely now. There are companies which are built only on route optimization. Just for instance, I won't name, but there are companies only on ensuring that people are able to optimize their route. We had to make our own route optimizer. So that's the kind of a tech that we build. Most of the companies are built, their infrastructure, the warehouse infrastructures are built for taking a product from the vendor and giving it out to the consumer. We are married to the product for the next 10 years. So imagine the same product coming back and moving within the warehouses over and over again. That kind of inventory tracking and managing, there is no off-the-shelf infrastructure which we have made in-house. So I'm just taking some of the examples. And a lot of it we are a tech and data company, which is why the experience is very high.
So talking about that, I mean, you're primarily a tech and data company. Why physical experience centers? What was your thought process there, and what are the advantages?
There was one report I typed that proved that report, these millennials and Gen Zs, they want to experience the products these days before purchasing. I think we went from an offline to only online. I think then the industry transition for the right purposes for a omni-channel kind of a presence where somebody can get a feel of the product as well. Imagine the feel of the product is so important to Gen Zs and millennials for a new product. Imagine the potential of it for a second-hand product or a refurbished product or a good to, as good as new product. Because that's where we are. We are one of the biggest refurbishing unit in India. We have about 1,500-1,600 just laborers, technicians all across, right? Across 20 cities. And we spend great degree of care, effort and investments on ensuring that the product is very good. And we wanted to showcase it to our consumer. That when you come to us, we have actually done a great degree of effort in terms of making it absolutely spec and feel and new. And just to showcase that, we had our experience centers as well, where somebody can come up and look at that sofa, because that's the kind of a quality of sofa that they will be able to give you. That's the kind of quality of washing machine that we'll be able to give you. So that was one of the important reasons why we thought that consumers will benefit.
No, that makes sense. And over your decade-long journey, the pandemic, I would imagine, was probably a pretty big shift. Can you walk us through Any changes that you saw in your consumer behaviors, and how did you guys adapt? Did you see more people open up to renting, or what was kind of the shifts that happened
It's
because of
very
that?
interesting because we went through a very tough time in COVID, uh, super tough time, and largely because of the consumer proposition itself. Anybody, bunch of our consumers, anybody who had purchased furniture and appliances or taken up on credit, you would remember in your own companies as well, a bulk of them transitioned back to their hometowns the moment this work from home started. Anybody who had taken furniture and appliances or purchased, they had to not only continue paying the rents for the house that they were not living in, or figure out a storage space for keeping those products when they were not even using it, and they were still paying those EMI. In our case, we welcome them with open hands that don't worry, just return the products back to us. We will take it with open hands. Of course, the business suffered, but that's the promise that we had made to them. Worst case scenario, you can just return the products and walk away, because it's a play in play out mechanism. And that proposition really helped a lot of repeat behavior from our consumers. They loved us for it. They loved us for it. So since then, the company has been, compounding at 40%, 40 to 50% year on year. Profits are compounding at 100% plus year on year. EBITDAs are compounding at, 80, 90% year on year. Only because of the repeat behavior that we are seeing from the same consumers that, love this part of the business proposition.
How did you get to profitability? What was that journey? So you've been very customer first, focusing on what they actually need. You've recently become profitable. Also think you're going public. What's that journey been like? How do you get to profitability after a lot of years of investing, building, um, almost over a decade?
Of course, I would like to say that we turned profitable also looking at just a small expense of 10,000 as well. We just became super frugal. You know, I think as promoters, founders, CEOs, the problem statement is there's so many opportunities that starts happening. You tend to go into that FOMO, get into a different category, get into this also, etc., etc. So I think in COVID, there's a lot of focus that happened, largely because there was, that was the need of the hour. We had to take care of our stakeholders and everything. So I think we became a lot more. The financial discipline just went notch up. The kind of automations that we started doing went notch up. So just for instance, as what I was saying that the KYC earlier, the automation was just about 20%. We took it to about 80 odd percent. So the manual intervention went down. If there was a large route optimizer that we were spending about 15, 20 lakhs on an outsourced manner, we brought it in house itself. There was our gross margins went up. We cut down a little bit of fat in the business where some of the spaces where it was not making a lot more frugal sense back then. Too many MVPs put together at one point in time is also a recipe of disaster. So I think we worked on that and became a lot more lean. At the same time, focusing a lot more on automation. That's the reason we got profitable. But I think this industry was looking at two things which is that give me a company which is not bleeding balance sheet that as a lender I can take comfort from. Otherwise it becomes a question of what is your runway. We wanted to get away from that answer altogether. That was runway is ultimate. Don't worry. Net worth is enough for you to fund me. So that question we were able to answer the moment we turned profitable. And by that moment we had already been not proven the business model. And the business model is of a occupancy. If for an 8-year period, if you are able to ensure that every time your product is deployed, that's a historical evidence of execution. So the moment these two things happen together, I think the growth has been phenomenal since then.
What does 2030 look like for Rentomojo? Maybe look 5 years down the line.
I think by 2030, then we're expecting about, close to about, if India has to grow at about 6 to 7% year on year at least, if we have to be that, what we're projecting to be the third largest economy in the world, $7, $8 trillion economy, there will be a need of 10 crore jobs that will get created. And India is a very interesting space because it's not like only Bombay's financial services or only Gurgaon is BPO. You get so many consortium of industries all across the different cities. So a lot of people, because of this abundance of jobs, will also switch jobs. So there's a lot of flux in the economy in the future, right? So we'll drive that organization and high flux economy or environment, and we want to create the most effective alternative for purchase. We want to be the best alternative to purchase. That's what we want to be by 2030 and take our own space. I think last 14 years, credit has taken its own space. Now it is a certain percentage of the purchase. We are creating this market, and we will be we have this responsibility of not only just creating this market, but being the market leader in that that space that we will create among our for ourselves. So that's what we see. We want to be I anticipate rental market itself to be closer to upwards of $3 to $4 billion by 2030, and it's a market creation. That's going to be the fraction of the total purchase that it has the potential to be.
Understand. And to close out, and why we call this Founders Unfiltered, what is some unfiltered feedback that you received from someone that really impacted you personally or professionally as an entrepreneur?
I think there are many. I've had credible angels, credible advisors. I think something that came from one of the advisors was, when I in COVID, I'd become almost 105, 106 kgs. So I was really, organic on the food. I think somebody gave me a good understanding. So, there's not a, balance that we have between professional and personal life. Somebody told me if you can't manage yourself, nobody will believe that you can manage a company as well. I think that was a very good point. I thought, and I lost around 16, 17 kgs in 4 months post that, and be continuing in that at least. Uh, More energetic now, yeah, just able to really drive the company a lot more better is what I feel.
That is good advice, and I agree. Geetansh, thank you for your time. Really enjoyed our conversation. I think it was a good peek into the last 10 years of India's ecosystem as well. Hope our listeners will enjoy as too.
Great, thank you, Aviral, thank you, Mazin, for some really awesome questions, and hope to see you in person soon.